Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. I'm about to take the Transport Canada Basic RPAS Pilot Certification exam right now on this terminal right here. Now, I've had my pilot certification for 6 years and I know this stuff inside out, so why would I be subjecting myself to this? Well, two reasons. The first reason is that I want to keep abreast of how the exam has evolved over time so that I can continue to advocate on your behalf to Transport Canada to indicate to them areas in the exam that need improvement, questions that are dubious, that kind of thing. And the second thing is, if you've never taken the basic exam before, this might give you a little bit of a flavor of what it's like and the experience. So a few things before I dive into this. The Basic RPAS exam, you have 90 minutes to do it. It's completely online and open book. I can have reference material open and I'll give you some hints for that in a second. There are 35 questions. They're all multiple choice. There's no penalty for getting a wrong answer. And my passing grade is only 65%. So it's not a terribly challenging exam from that perspective. But one thing that might throw you is that the kinds of questions that you'll see on the exam most of them have nothing to do with drones, is the bottom line. They have to do with the broader elements of aviation, the broader elements of safety in aviation and this sort of thing, not specifically about flying your drone. So that can throw you off, and I don't want you to get worried about that. So just relax, jump through the exam, and all will be well. Now, a couple of tips. So in terms of material to have open in front of you, I would say the number one thing that you want is the Transport Canada AIM, Aeronautical Information Manual document. So I've got that open in one window in front of me. I've got two screens here, by the way. I can't show you my screens because you are absolutely forbidden from sharing exam information, whether they be questions or the answers. So I'll be kind of paraphrasing what I see on my screen in terms of questions and the answers, but I will not be sharing exactly what those answers are. The second thing that I would recommend you have open, and this is completely optional, is my PDF that is designed specifically as a study guide for people taking this exam. Now, I do sell this. It's completely optional, and as I said, this exam is open book, so you don't need to buy that PDF. But if you're struggling or if you're concerned, I think it's a good resource. So the other tip that I'd recommend is that you have a little piece of paper handy so that you can jot down three things. Number one, questions that you have no clue about. So if you are completely stumped, write it down. And just the question number. Question number 14. Second list I would recommend is questions that you are pretty confident about the answer, but you're a little dubious. You want to go back and check later. So have a second list of those questions. And then the third list that you might want to keep is terminology that you see in the questions or even in the answers that you're not necessarily familiar with. That way, if you don't pass, you'll have a little bit of a clue of the areas that you want to focus in on in terms of the terminology. Now, why would you keep track of those question lists? That's so that you can kind of go through the whole exam, get to the end, so you're not panicking about completing it, and then you can go back and check things, spend more time on questions that you haven't got a clue about, that sort of thing. So I'm going to pause the video at this point while I register for the exam. To do that, you go to the Transport Canada Drone Safety website. There's links for becoming a pilot. That's what you follow. There is a $10 fee, and I'll be paying that and then getting myself ready, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm all registered, set up. I've actually hit the start button, so my timer is going. So the good news is on your screen, you'll see the 35 questions along the bottom. As you start out, they're in yellow, indicating that you haven't answered them. And you can always navigate back and forth to any questions you haven't answered. There's no penalty for wrong answers. So don't worry about guessing if you absolutely must, but don't leave a question unanswered. There's no point in that because it's definitely wrong if you don't give an answer. Your time remaining is also shown on the screen, so you can always keep track of that. but don't be obsessed with that. You've got 90 minutes, an hour and a half to answer 35 questions. You got lots of time. So the first question that I see here is it's about the weather. So it's asking about a particular type of thing that you're experiencing. I can't use the terminology precisely because that would be breaking the number one rule about transmitting information. And then it gives you some options about what could be causing that particular condition. So I'm going to look through these. There may be an obvious answer. It's important to look at the answers themselves because sometimes they eliminate themselves and you're down to maybe 2 choices instead of 4. So this is a curious one because it is not entirely obvious, in fact, even though many of us have been outside and so we understand the weather, but what this particular one is driving at, I'm not certain. But so I'm gonna put that one down as a question I'm not sure about. Moving on to question 2. So this one is about the theory of flight. Now, remember I mentioned that a lot of the questions have nothing to do with flying drones. So theory of flight is often focused on lift and elements of that. And for those of us who are flying quadcopters, like with rotors and all that, as opposed to fixed-wing remote control aircraft, generally aren't that interested in lift because the props do it all. The system does it all by itself. But you're expected to understand the theory behind all of that, which applies as much to rotors as it does to fixed wings. So this one is about fixed-wing aircraft. And something about the wing orientation. But here's a situation where I can Google the key term in here and understand what it really is telling me. And it tells me the answer exactly. So I'm going to cross that one off my not sure list because Googling it gave me precisely the answer. And I really don't think that's cheating because I have absolutely no reason as a drone pilot, as a quadcopter drone pilot, to understand this particular element of how my drone flies. So the next one is about the legalities. So it's talking about the regulations, and it's fairly easy. So this next one is about, I guess this would fall into the flight operations category of questions. It's talking about visual observers or spotters. So you need to know things about what spotters can and cannot do and under what circumstance. So there's one answer that's definitely wrong. 3 of them are correct, but one is most correct. And by the way, one of the tricks you can use in terms of eliminating or settling in on a question is if there are multiple answers, the one that is the most correct or the most safety oriented, I'll say, is probably the correct answer if you need to whittle them down. So this next one is about, I guess this is again a regulatory question, and it's a fundamental one that you really, really, really should know about altitude, about how high you can fly. And I will point out that this particular one, all of the answers are in imperial units, cubits, I think. Oh no, feet. just as old. Anyway, aviation is all in the old world of feet and nautical miles and things like that. If you're anything like me and think more in metric, it can be a little confusing at times. So just be aware of that. Don't get rattled. Just relax. That's funny. Question number 6 has the same piece of terminology in it as my first question. That was a little worrisome. This is another weather question or weather-related question. And it's purely a terminology question. Like, they describe a situation, but you need to know the name of this particular meteorological event. Not a reasonable question in my mind. And I'm going to Google it just to confirm, and I correctly got the right answer. This is about, I guess this falls into the category of Oh, airframes, power plants, propulsion, that sort of thing. So it's a question about physical elements of your drone, and it's talking about batteries. It's a practical question and not difficult. So this is fascinating. So this question, and I remember this from my very first attempt at this exam in 2019. Maybe not this exact questions because they changed the questions. You don't get the same questions every time you take the exam, but this type of question was there. It's asking me about an operation where I'm in controlled airspace. Now, as a basic RPAS pilot, I'm not allowed to fly in controlled airspace or even particularly close to aerodromes, specifically certified aerodromes. So this one's talking about I'm inside controlled airspace, and it wants me to tell them what I'm supposed to do under a abnormal condition. So I'm going to note this down as something that needs feedback to TC. It's a bad question. There's no question. This is a bad question. It should not be on the exam because it is not relevant to basic operations, except under one circumstance, if you accidentally go into controlled airspace. But the way this is worded, you're not only in controlled airspace, but you're talking to air traffic control, and shouldn't be doing that. Not if you're a basic pilot. This is a time zone question. So this, I think this fits into either navigation or flight operations, probably flight operations in terms of categories. I'm just trying to figure out which questions are in which category. So it tells you that you're in a particular time zone and it wants you to convert the time zone. Now, why would it want you to do that? Well, there is actually a reason for this. Many of the operational times at airports and things like that are given in universal time or Zulu time. So knowing how that converts to your local time zone can be a little bit important. Not terribly important. You can always Google it. But anyways. So it wants me to know, okay, so it is that. And it even gives you the time zone difference. You just need to know whether you're adding or subtracting, really. This one's interesting because it gives me a diagram. So it shows me a little map, an aviation-related map with aviation symbology and things like that on it, and it's asking me a question about it. And in this particular case, you could get it wrong if you didn't look at the map, but the map actually gives you the answer right on it. So this is another weather question. Although it could be flight operations, I suppose, in some respect. It's given me a terminology for something that could happen on my wings. Again, it's a fixed wing situation, and it's a particular kind of thing, and you're expected to know about how it got there and what to do about it. I have no idea what this stuff is. Okay, so Googling it got me an answer. Would never need to know this if I'm flying a drone. Okay, so an accident has occurred. You're flying your drone and you've had an accident of a particular kind. And it asks, well, so what should you do? Oddly, the most obvious answer, particularly for drones, I don't think is the correct one. Now, this one, I think, is actually in the AIM. When you're searching in a PDF document or in my study guide, which is a PDF, Control F will bring up a search bar, so that's an important thing to know. There is actually a reference to a Transport Canada thing with exactly this kind of thing. I'm going to change my answer, probably to a wrong one. Question 13, I have 70 minutes remaining, is about what kind of airspace can a basic pilot fly in? And that's a good question to ask. And the answer is well, if you know your stuff, you'll know what the answer is. So this is about planning your flight and who's responsible for doing different things. Fairly easy answer. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. So one of the answers is funny, and it's okay to laugh. And this is about the legality, legal documents, and that kind of thing. So this is about basic legalities of flying, and it's a very fundamental thing about flying. So this is an interesting one because this exam is supposed to represent the rules that go into effect on November the 4th, 2025. Now, right now, it's September of 2025. And the correct answer is no longer true in the November 2025 rules. So I'm going to report that as a bad question, or well, not a bad question, but one that they need to fix. Another one where you're given a diagram. Now, this particular diagram is out of the CFS, Canada Flight Supplement. So CFS is a listing of all the aerodromes in Canada that are either registered, certified, or military. And you need to know how to read some of these things. As a basic pilot, because you're supposed to stay away from airports, certified airports, you do need to know how to read these things. It's not a particularly difficult question, but you do need to pick out a particular piece of information out of here. That, if you just read it, you'd probably spot it anyway. Next question, question 18. It's another diagram. It's a weird looking diagram, actually. And it's, again, something that as a drone pilot of a quadcopter, you definitely don't need to know this. And it's a terminology, a part of an aircraft, and a fixed wing aircraft specifically. Question 19, it's another CFS question. You're given an image from the CFS document listing information about an aerodrome, and it's asking you a question about that. Again, not a difficult question if you know how to read a CFS document. I do have a video on how to do that. It's fairly long, but it'll give you the answer, that's for sure. And it will be in my study guide also. Oh, I see. And the actual answer is given in the phonetic alphabet, so you need to know that as well. And they could easily throw in a trick answer, so watch out for that. But in this case, they did not. So this is strictly a rule question, and it's a fairly obscure thing. I mean, you don't do this very often, but it's a rule thing. You should know this. It's okay. Question 21, 64 minutes remaining. What? Okay, so this is a technical question about the technical specifications of a drone. Okay, so I was going to say, but it depends. And one of the answers is, it depends. So that's good. Although that might not be the right, well, no, I'm going to say. And it's not true, actually. I'm going to put this one down as a bad question. New technology, like this is a question that, which is out of date, basically, because there are technologies in place that mean this particular kind of function would be better today than it might have been even a couple of years ago. Next question, question 22, is a regulation question, and it's a fundamental one, so you better know the answer to this one. Just always read even obvious questions to make sure that they haven't turned it around inside out or something like that, just to make sure it's not a trick question. It's another definition kind of a question about a kind of a crew member or a role that someone in your crew might have. Not hard to figure out. This is a regulatory question. Unfortunately, this one, again, is a situation where, as a basic pilot, you shouldn't be in this kind of a situation. So I'm going to report this one as a bad question. I mean, it is a rule question. And there is a specific rule about this, but I don't know. You shouldn't need to know this. This is a good rule question, and it's a good one. It's actually a really good question. Let's see if the answers are good. Okay, there's one that's just plain wrong. Anyway, it's good question. Good answer. It's well constructed, not trick. Okay, this is another rule type question. It's kind of weird, but it's acceptable as a question. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it now from the perspective of should it even be in the exam, but it's okay, reasonable anyway. This is an organizational question about Transport Canada and Nav Canada and how they're organized and who does what. You don't need to know this, but fine. I mean, who cares? Okay, so this is an age question. And honestly, I've forgotten. I'm consulting my study guide. Let's see, here we go. Yeah, it's an age question. You just need to know, I guess. It's the kind of thing that, if it doesn't apply to you, then why would you need to know this? If you're old enough. If you're a geezer. Okay, this is another rule type question. Strangely, it's very, very similar to a question a couple of questions back. Almost identical. It's a more difficult question than the other one. Like, it's worded in a more difficult way, and the answers are trickier. This one is a duplicate of a previous question as well, but it's a fundamental question that you should know the answer to. One of the answers is funny. This is a rule question, and they have a mix of metric measures and imperial measures. So just to make you a little confused, and it's a very confusing question. Like the wording is poor, but work your way through it, and the answer is clear, as long as you don't mix up meters and feet. Oh, wonderful! It's another weather type question, weather or theory of flight, I suppose, and totally irrelevant to drones, quadcopters. I don't know. I have no idea, and I don't care, but I'll look it up anyway. Okay. Well, it gives the answer in the AI overview that I Googled here, or when I Googled the key things. Sorry, folks, that's a dumb question. This is about radio communications. Basically, it's a theoretical question about radio and its transmission. Okay, so this is related to FPV flight with goggles on. Okay, one of the questions is pretty dumb, but it's a fundamental question, a law type question, a regulatory question, sorry. Last question, 53 minutes left. Okay, this is a good question too, at least the question is, I haven't looked at the answers yet, but the question is a good one and something you should be very familiar with. Actually, the way they've worded it, I mean, there is an obvious correct answer. However, it's not strictly speaking correct, because if you have permission in this particular circumstance, you could operate there. And there's no answer that gives you that. Now, on the last question, instead of next for the next question, it says finish. I'd recommend that you not hit finish until you go over all of your questions to make sure that the ones that you were a little queasy about are answered accurately. I'm going to go back to my very, very first question. And it was one that I had kind of guessed at. It was a weather question. And I'm just going to Google it. Yeah, and I had guessed that. And again, it's very easy to navigate to these questions if you know the number, if you note that down on your piece of paper, because there's a little bar across the bottom. You just click on the question number and it'll bring it right up. It'll show you what you answered, and you can review that to determine if your answer was correct or not. So I'm satisfied with all my answers. I'm going to, so you have to go to the last question and then hit finish. And when you do that, it does say if you'd like to review your answers, you can do that in the remaining time. But if you're ready to submit your exam, press the submit button. So you've got an option to go back even if you hit finish. Okay, so I've submitted my exam. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Congratulations, you've passed. Yay! What did I get? Okay, so when you pass, you're told you're given your certificate as a PDF. There's a link to it anyway, and you'll get an email with that. You'll also receive a link to your exam results. Now, don't expect your exam results to say you were correct on questions this, and this, and you had the wrong answer on this one. In a normal sort of exam environment, you're provided very specific feedback on a question-by-question basis, right? Yes, you're wrong, right, wrong kind of thing. In this exam, you're not. If you're wrong on a particular area, you're given the knowledge area that it's in and kind of a clue as to what it's about, like maybe airport operations or something like that. But you are not provided specific feedback. I think that's a terrible way to run an exam, but that's the way Transport Canada has chosen to do that. I have given them that feedback in the past. Wow, I only got 91%. That's kind of scary, isn't it? In this case, I missed one on human factors. Well, of course not, because I haven't been a human long enough. One on meteorology, so one of the weather questions I got wrong, and one of the radio telephony questions I got wrong. When you look at those areas, human factors, for example, it says you may want to review the following. The pilot and the operating environment, review the relevant information on wake turbulence. Now, that's one of the terminology things that I said, why would I ever need to know this? But there you go. And oddly, that was a human factors question on wake turbulence. My meteorology question that I got wrong, it says, review the different types of air turbulence. Apparently, I know nothing about turbulence. And then my radio telephony question is turbulence. What? No. It described the factors interfering with radio communications. I can't believe that I got that one wrong, but that's what they say. So there you have it. My experience with the Basic RPAS exam. I hope your experience is as good as mine in terms of passing the exam. So if you get it, congratulations and safe and happy flying.